Hey everyone, today's skill breakdown is going to be on Sir Dagonet. Sir Dagonet is an Arcanist belonging to the Old Faith Tyrant alignment that you actually recruit through the alignment chart. You will need 8 points in Old Faith and 8 points in Tyrant in order to unlock his recruitment mission. Once you unlock him, you actually start off with him having access to his tier 2 abilities. Sir Dagonet is a pretty fun Arcanist to use. He's extremely debuff focused, and I didn't get him quite as high level as I wanted to in this playthrough, but I have been playing with him a bit more on some other runs, and he's a lot more fun, and I definitely recommend giving him a try after you see his skill tree. Maybe it'll pique your interest as well. Starting with the tier 1, for his basic attack we have Force Bolt. This is 6 AP, range of 10, 100% weapon damage, and has knockback. Going into his upgrades, first we have Piercing Bolt for 10% armor break, Damned Prey, 20% damage increase against hexed units. This one is pretty much a must, as Force Bolt is going to be his primary form of damage compared to lots of other Arcanists that get offensive spells. So having all the boosts damage-wise for this Force Bolt is actually much more important compared to someone like Ector. Third is Mind Game. Dagonet gets 1 AP back when killing an enemy with Force Bolt. This may be useful. I personally don't get a lot of killing blows with my Arcanist, so if you do, this is worth it. If you're like me and you're not, you're kind of softening targets with them, you may want to skip this one. And lastly is Multiple Targets. This changes your Force Bolt to now fire 3 different projectiles, and each one can target different enemies. But each bolt, as you can see, only does 34%. So if you put them all on one target, it is a slight increase in damage. But if you're looking for raw damage, this probably isn't the best way to do it. This is more so to split target focus. Force Bolt has knockback, so if there's multiple targets you need to push away to create space, this is useful. But of all the different types of bolt attacks Arcanists get, Force Bolt tends to have the least utility in my opinion, so multiple targets is kind of a hard sell for me. For his first hex we have Blood Hex. This is a standard one. It causes bleeding and the target deals 30% less damage. This is a powerful debuff. You get a little bit of damage in, and it also mitigates the threat of some enemies, therefore protecting your team from incoming damage. First upgrade, Hemophilia, reduce physical debuff resist by 10%. This is actually decent because you will come across enemies that do have high debuff resistances, so lowering this makes ensuing debuffs that much more effective. Dagonet himself has a lot of these, so this can actually be good for comboing with his own kit. Next, reduce the cooldown by 1. You pretty much want to take cooldown reduction on everything when it comes to Arcanists. I mean, pretty much every class in general. I love taking the cooldown reductions, but Arcanists have an extremely high ability to cycle through their cooldowns, so this is even more important. Increase the duration by 1. This is mostly super impactful earlier in the game before you get to some of those tier 3 talents where you can't cycle them as easily, but this basically lets you have more uptime on your hexes and can let you spread them out easier too, even when you do reach that tier 3. And finally, Black Blood, plus 50% hex intensity for Blood Hex. This means the effectiveness of the hex is 50% stronger, but only the part that is in pink text. So this won't increase the bleed damage, but it will increase the damage debuff here. So by a 50%, this isn't additive, it's multiplicative. Meaning this doesn't become 80% now, it becomes 45%. This is before taking into account just other hex intensity upgrades you can get throughout the skill tree. Third is his Slowing Hex. Very strong, very useful at all stages of the game. You slow a target. This makes it so moving is 100% more AP. So every space they move, instead of being 1, it now costs 2. This is great for preventing, or at the very least, greatly delaying the advance of some threatening melee units on your party. The first upgrade I always take is this first one, Witchcraft. Reduce the cost by 1, Now it's a super cheap 1 AP spell, ensuring that you have plenty of AP left over to get attacks in with like Force Bolt or do other things. Second is vulnerability. It now applies a vulnerability debuff of 10%, meaning they take more damage. It's super cheap. This makes it a great opener, so you put it on a unit, even if you're not worried about them reaching you, just because you plan to shoot them or attack them with other units. Now they have more incoming damage and can die easier, maybe save you an attack. Fatigue, increase the duration by 1. This is useful, so that way they just stayed slowed longer while you're waiting for it to come off cooldown. When you reach tier 3 and you're cycling cooldowns more, this just gives you the opportunity to spread it out amongst more targets. Finally is Mass Hex. This turns slowing Hex into an AoE, a 3x3, but now it is 40% less effective. So now this is 60% more AP. This one's sort of up to personal choice. Early game, this may be more efficient. I've never really taken this. I prefer to have the stronger debuff on a singular unit that I think is sort of the problem at the moment. And especially once you get into the late game and you have the tier 3 abilities, you don't really need the AoE version. You can very easily just put the single target version on multiple enemies at once. For the passive, Magical Armor, you want to take this on pretty much every Arcanist. It adds a bunch of durability. 22 armor for the first attack. Basically, it's a free don't take damage for the first attack. With upgrades, the hero gains 9 armor, which increases the amount of protection. So in case you're taking a really big hit, it makes sure that there's much less damage bleed over into their small health pools. Add an injury token in case they are taking vitality damage. My Arcanists rarely do, so I usually skip out on this one. Extended armor now lasts for 2 attacks. This is a must-have. And then enchanted armor, just increasing more armor, more durability, making them safer. Getting into the non-upgradable passives, we have extra damage, just more weapon damage. This is a decently solid pick. Potent Hex, this one you definitely want to take. Getting 20% Hex intensity, just making all of the debuffs stronger. And then finally, Master Alchemist potion effects are increased by 50%. I pretty much never take this one. If you're playing on a harder difficulty and you're just really getting messed up and your potions just feel like they're not impactful enough, maybe consider this. But generally, you're going to be skipping it. Getting into Tier 2, this is where his sort of iconic skill is. And this is when he starts with as well. Desecrated Ground. It's one of the rare 4x4 AoE effects. It deals 20% weapon damage to every unit, and it lasts for 2 turns. Units within the ground suffer an additional 20% weapon damage if they start their turn within this area, and for every tile they move trying to get out of it. So it'll hit them multiple times. To make this even more amazing, you can add plus 5% damage. That doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, they're going to be taking multiple hits. You want to reduce the AP cost, so that way you can cycle it more often. With Miasma, you weaken them. This one you may skip, you may take if you're parking your own units adjacent to it, so that way you can hit them while they stand in it, and they'll hit you back while standing in it. This is good, but if you're not really finding yourself parking yourself near the Desecrated Ground much, you may want to not take this. Most importantly, though, is Quagmire. They are now slowed while they're in it. So if they want to get out, they're going to be using a lot of AP to get out, and potentially be unable to get out. You will do a surprising amount of damage with this, especially with gear that stacks with dealing bonus damage to slowed targets. This will very quickly add up. Probably one of my favorite abilities Arcanists get is Death Hex. Target loses 30% of its current vitality for 1 turn. Basically, you just delete a portion of their health bar to try and secure a kill on a priority target, and with Hex intensity, this can become a very large amount of their health bar. First upgrade, Horde Visions. You also reduce the mental debuff resist. Again, fairly useful, trying to open them up to more of your own debuffs and your crowd control effects. Dread, 20% vulnerability. This just synergizes naturally very well with Death Hex. You're deleting their HP to try and kill them that turn, so you apply the 20% vulnerability to try and secure the kill that much more efficiently. Oblivion, Reduce the cooldown by 1. No brainer. And incantation plus 40% hex intensity. That just means more of that health bar is going away. This is another must pick. Going to passives, Master of Hexes plus 25% hex intensity. You're taking everything that involves hex intensity with Arcanist. The upgrade for Ancestral Hex, just 10% more in hex intensity. Corrupt Armor. Enemies have their armor reduced when affected by a hex. I don't really take this one very often because the amount of armor they lose isn't a huge amount. If your party comp really doesn't have much in the way of armor breaking, then every bit helps, and this can be worth it. But usually if you're running a champion, that's about all the armor breaking you need. Quick casting, AP cost of hexes reduced by 1. This is super important, especially for comboing off of the tier 3 abilities we're going to be going into later. Cooldowns and AP cost reduction, good on everyone, extra important on Arcanist. Power of Hexes, the hero's weapon damage is increased by 5% for every active hex. You're going to be putting a lot of hexes around, so it's very easy to get a pretty decent damage multiplier up on this. You won't be hitting like 100%, 50% may even be pretty difficult, but, you know, 25%, that's not a hard ask. Quick Curse, decrease the AP cost for the first hex spell cast in every turn by 1. Just more of that reduction, more of that efficiency. It cannot reduce something to 0. I believe the devs have informed that unless an ability explicitly says it will cost 0, no AP cost reductions will make it cost 0. So just keep that in mind when you're using this. And then Terror Wings, gain 1 movement AP for every active hex. This sounds good, but generally your Arcanist isn't going to be moving a whole lot, so I don't really think this is worth. If you find your Arcanist is constantly getting into trouble, then maybe. But if that's the case, you may want to reevaluate some of your tactics. Getting into Tier 3. For the last active skill, we have Cast Stigma. You probably recognize this from Mordred's kit. Dagonet is the only other character in the game that has this ability, and it's a very strong one. Cause 20% vulnerability to a target, so 20% more damage, high range of 10, low cost. It's a great move. The first upgrade, Stigma of Dishonor, extra 10% vulnerability for 30%. If you're using this ability, you definitely want to take this. Lasting Stigma, lasts 1 turn. Just very useful, so that way you can spread it around more without having to constantly worry about putting it on the same person over and over again. Wasting Sign, the target loses 5 armor. Again, armor breaking on an Arcanist isn't usually a high priority, but depending on your team comp, this may be pretty useful. And then Mind Shackle, reduce the cost by 1. Normally, you would want to take this. However, on Dagonet, you do not need to. As you can see, it already costs 1 AP. This is because Stigma has the Hex tag. It does not benefit from Hex intensity, but it still qualifies as a Hex. And thanks to the Master of Hexes upgrade we took here, it's already reduced by 1. And as I mentioned before, unless an ability states that it will reduce it to 0, the lowest it will go is 1. This has been confirmed by the devs when they were asked in the official Discord. I think that's completely fair. Having 0 cost abilities would make Arcanists absurdly broken. Next we have Long Reach, +1 tiles for range on all attacks. Arcanists have long range already, so adding another 1 on top of that is very beneficial to them. Just let them ping off at enemies from across the map. With the first upgrade, plus 10% weapon damage against units that are at least 6 tiles away. You are going to want to take this because enemies are pretty much always going to be at least 6 tiles away if you're playing smartly with your Arcanist. Sometimes they'll get in, but the vast majority, this is going to be active. Far Shot, +1 tile range for skills when the hero's at maximum AP. Basically, this just makes your first attack of the round get a little extra range. This does have some use. Personally, I like to redistribute this somewhere else. Disengage, plus 10% weapon damage when the hero is disengaged, meaning there's no enemies adjacent to them. You're going to want this because this should have nearly 100% uptime. Finally, Prepared, plus 25% weapon damage for the first attack in the encounter. This may be pretty decent for a strong opener. Not really my priority, but you may like it. Spell Resistance. This one isn't one I really take a whole lot on any of my Arcanists, but if you're worried about some resilience against enemy spellcasters, this is for you. Minus 25% damage from incoming spells. With Flameborn, they become immune to burning. There aren't a lot of enemies that can apply burning in this game, so this seems like a very niche pick. Protection, an additional 10% damage reduction to incoming spells. Mental Fort, gain 15% mental debuff resist. This is probably one of the main reasons why I would take this talent, is because debuff resistance I actually do value pretty highly. And then Ancient Ward, fully negate the effect of the first incoming spell. Just a freebie. I mostly see use out of this ability and spell resistance in general for those enemies that just have those AoE spells where they mark an area and then you need to move out of it, or at the start of the next turn you'll get hit. If you really don't like moving your Arcanist out of these, then maybe take this. Other than that, you're probably better putting your points elsewhere. Next is Spell Power. This is a take on pretty much all Arcanists. The range of your skills increased by another 1. This really helps contribute to that insane range Arcanists get, and an extra 10% damage. Plus 1 Spellcraft is also useful for totems and shrines and finding chests. Mindstorm, probably the most important skill that every Arcanist gets. If at least 3 skills are on cooldown, casting a new skill reduces all current cooldowns by 1. This means when you have 3 abilities currently on cooldown, you cast something else, not Force Bolt, but any of your other abilities, those cooldowns will drop by 1. When you have a bunch of cheap spells with low cooldowns, like Slowing Hex, Blood Hex, Stigma, this lets you really cheese cooldowns on your more important abilities like Death Hex or Desecrated Ground into being able to cast them multiple times in one round, or at least once every single round. On Dagonet in particular, this really lets you put Desecrated Grounds all over the battlefield and just make it one hellish swamp for your enemies. Then finally, Strong-Willed, 30% mental debuff resist. So that covers Sir Dagonet's skill tree. As you can see, he is extremely debuff focused, not a whole lot in the way of offensive maneuvers. You're really going to be relying on Force Bolt for a lot of it, and then to a greater extent Desecrated Ground once you have that Mindstorm. It'll still be strong before then in terms of slowing down enemies, but once you get the ability to really start churning out a bunch of them and getting extra debuffs from the rest of your party, the damage from Desecrated Ground will really start racking up. All that being said, he's a strong controller, he's a strong support, he's pretty fun, just turning everything into a swamp. I definitely think he is worth playing around with. I hope you found this useful and informative, and thanks for watching.